colleagues, good morning. I'm Fedor of Sигаев, Technical Director, Postgres Pro. Regarding the star 1C, is too much. Anton knows everything about 1S, and they will answer all your questions that you can ask in chat. Now they will give a talk on relevant topics, and during this time you can ask questions, and then until the end of the hour we will respond to your questions that you might have. Good morning, my name is Anton. I'm Novosibirsk. I put some questions. Where did I take it? I took it from those questions that I'm asking in Telegram groups, in conferences, etc. And those questions that are most often frequented and will warm you up as well, so that you ask questions and will respond very fast. First question, organizational. Very often people ask, is it possible Postgres to come to support with Postgres from 1S? When I assembled it and implemented and work, but I want support of Postgres Pro. Is it possible? Good question. I would say it's possible, but not, because supporting 1S, we're not responsible, but in your independent assembly you can include certain unknown parameters, and we already encountered some issues that are not obvious and hard to find. So in exceptional cases or interesting cases, we can provide support, but we take on permanent support only those without patches or our own products, which is natural. Okay, thank you. Think will be eye-opening where you can take assemblies. It's not advertising. Right, next question. Everybody should know it, but practice shows that either people are lazy or don't understand what is written in documentation. It's a normal situation, and when you meet and figure out and you go to documentation, the question is, Fedor, can you explain what happens after we launch databases by years? There are myths that after launches it's only in the pre-recording log, and how we're going to read it. Like you may block 1S base if you launch it by years, and what happens? Briefly, it's dump, and I understand the question, but we need to discuss many aspects here. But the question is what we receive in terms of visibility and consistency and load. So here the question is about visibility of these transactions. As you heard about default, recommit, repeatable, and two other levels. Actually, in terms of the database itself, by years, it's not different from other transactions. Yes, it's longer, but basically it's the same transaction. It's how Postgres ensures visibility of record. You all heard about vacuum. Everybody has a headache. What is vacuum? That's deleting records that are not visible. These are all outdated, corrupt data. So when it works in years and transaction is opened, and vacuum suspends its work, it's not just stopped. It won't see and cleans those data which is seen by pgdam, and sees those versions and records at the beginning of transactions. And shouldn't catch me by word, it's for the first query, but it's not a matter of principle. Vacuum stops cleansing records that could be visible in pgdam pro, and it puts it in a text format. Why is it bad for database? On the one hand, it's not, because records are val and write-ahead log will be written without changes and or deletions from this val. Negative thing is those who jumped from vacuum, reading documents and were interested what happened and what happens with database if it's not working. It's obvious that we'll retain all versions for a long time, and we'll have some indices and tables issues. So it's not worth it. So if you have high load, you shouldn't run pgdam. If it's not extremely important, do it in low load period. Everybody knows about it, and nobody will do it, these backups in peak hours, except cases when it's crashed, or when 1S wants urgent update. Yeah, right. It's a favorite way to kill performance is to launch configuration update, detachment of backup with 1S and pgdam with database for reliability. I would launch PGB backup that does technical copy so that nobody is bored. Did I answer your question? Yes. Moreover, you touched the auto vacuum question. I want to ask a question. In 13th version of Postgres, many things were issued and released, but I'd like to draw attention to auto vacuum because 1S database stretches thousands of tables and indices. They also like to put 10 or 100 databases, and so auto vacuum is difficult to reach out to all the tables. So here in 13, there is another parameter, is to cleanse what you don't need to cleanse. There is a parameter to look up on the table, and we see where inserts. We make auto vacuum look at it. If its terms of analysis clear, statistics needs to be updated. We have plus 10 million records. Why auto vacuum needs to look where it doesn't need to be cleansed? It's a puzzle. It's you disclose it in your article on Habra, but please explain it. It says if you don't look at, then the visibility card is not updated and it becomes ineffective. So please tell me what auto vacuum is doing except vacuuming, and why is it needed, indices, etc., so that you understand why we need to set it up. I'll start from afar because I like the previous question. There is a fact that Postgres novices are puzzled about and obfuscated, and we made a pgdam and last we have textdam, and we recover it, we put it in a database successfully. It's all without errors, but when we start running this queries, all of a sudden we see rate activity is flushing on disk. And why is it happening. Again, it's a Postgres specificity and visibility. Each record knows which transaction inserted it. Now it's for simplicity. So when Postgres looks the record and sees a transaction that committed it, not committed but created this record. Now we need to find out the status of this transaction. And for this there's a CLOG mechanism for each commit, for each transaction. We consult for this CLOG, and for each record it's expensive and not effective. So how Postgres avoids it? It's simple. Even select when it sees record, it advises about the status of this transaction and makes hit bits so that next time referring to this record you can say that this record, this transaction that created this has been really committed, and you don't need any CLOG. So after PGB, vacuum is needed for this purpose, to put hint bits. Next thing, what is index only scan by itself? You can imagine if you make select from indices, you get the record and you have a broad index, and platform either suffers or enjoys it, and index includes all the needed fields, but the index doesn't have transaction visibility, it's only in the table. So before inventing this only scan, you should have raised this record and looked at hit bit. Index only scan is an invention. You can imagine if we store 1 bit per page of table that tells that on this page absolutely all records already committed and visible. If we have a full spectrum of fields that we need in a query, and we have this visibility map, and you see that on this page and table it's all committed, then we don't need to go into this table. It's clear that as soon as we inserted something on this table or updated, this visibility map is removed, and index only scan, if we plan it sees there's no bit, then I need to enter into the table. So if you have the table that's only inserted, it happens that only scan index for this table encounters the record with no bits, and we need to enter the page, and it slows down, crashes the disk and the system and shared buffer. It's not good. But there is a problem. We operated with one record and we cannot put this bit. It's easy to remove. It's clear when delete, update, or insert. But when we insert, we don't know the transaction can be rolled back. So we remove the bit. So any insert, update, delete removes this bit. But put it is only with vacuum. So until version 13, vacuum didn't go to these pages because historically we only worried about remote records. And it was certain deficiency, so we'll see visibility maps in the future. If vacuum doesn't move to this table, then you risk the speed but not consistency. It's all good with consistency, so vacuum is about optimization, except events rough round when the number of transactions more than 2 billion. Then it becomes necessary. Did I scare you? No, excellent. General recommendation, put a lot of data, make vacuum. If you recover from backup, do vacuum analyze. Excellent. Now, to answer your favorite question, you also touched upon bloating index. Yeah, we fight it, and duplication is made in 14th Postgres, added optimization at update from top down. And the question is, theoretically, can we achieve that indexes are bloated the same way as data? Now vacuum copes with is not bloated if no unexpected removal of data. It's not even bloated but not used, and we update a lot, then it's bloated. But it's quite effectively cleaning, but it doesn't cope with indices. And B3 indices is 1S. So it's not enough resource in order to fight it, but theoretically it's not possible to, and we need to agree to this indices bloating and better transition to 13th Postgres. Well, what can I say? It's possible to do a query, but the question is at what expense? And expenses here are first efforts of programmers to implement it, and second, why programmers are not trying to take effort in this is the index can become more expensive rather than recreation. So example, when you insert a table of records, one column and gradually increase in values, and you insert it, and then due to update of configuration, let's say, well, if there is a regulation task, and no, it keeps some summary data, and it happens in B3 index. We had 1, 2, 3, up to 1,000 in 999 records, crashed and only one record left on the page. But next month from 1,000 to 2,000, and we keep it, keep a summary, and as a result, we have on one page one record with 1,000, on the other with 2,000, etc. So now advice and in the future is 3 index, possibly when we spend a lot, when vacuum removes records from indices, it glues pages back and sees 2 neighboring pages, having very few records can be put in one page. But running with merging pages in index and back, it's takes some costs. And look, ideally it's possible to do, but first it's a significant effort, and gluing pages back is invasive in terms of logs. While we're gluing pages, we get stuck in this area. And second, if it's unsuccessful, and if we clean a lot, it's cheaper to recreate index rather than glue several pages. Okay, clear. We have a provocative question. How do we find out that index needs to be recreated? I need to look at the ratio of filling, not how many filled pages, but on average. Well, analog of fragmentation. So why it's not worth to worry about empty pages when Postgres is quite smart, and when it makes new pages,
it will take it from the clean ones. It will not allocate anything. So if the number of pages in your index is up to 20 or 30% reasonable, then you don't need to readjust. The index, you will be diminished by 20 or 30%. Well, if it's 90, then that makes sense, because most probably they're lying there. All right. So we start asking the question when it's under 30%, right? Yes. So more or less, right? A rough estimate. It's not percentage. It's not 9%. It's like reasonable dozens of percentage points. Because if 50% is filled, then in an ideal world you will get like a drop in index of 2 times. If it's not a huge index, then it will not give him so much. All right, thank you. I think we have so ZFS. It's a hot issue now. Let's use ZFS. Let's use Postgres with ZFS. Anybody who says that it is too slow with Postgres are not telling the truth. So the question is, from your practice, practice of your clients of Postgres Pro, how does it look? Have you ever faced any major challenges, or it simply works with some, it doesn't work with others? What's your attitude towards OpenZFS? Well, on one hand, I think a lot about it. I think highly about it as an administrator, because it's quite flexible and quite easy to use thing. But then again, it has this CRC signature. You can subscribe your data in Linux. The checksum file control is only BRTFS and OpenZFS. Nobody puts BRTFS in production, and in the other case, you can only subscribe the directory, not the data. So this is quite a useful thing. Postgres can also work with the CRC, in particular if you specify this is in a DB. But on the file system side, it is also a useful thing to do. So these were the advantages that I know that I've heard about. As for the cons, I can say that over the 5 years, 6 years of our company, we had one single case when a client's file system crashed completely. We could not reassemble it at all. We had to remake it, to format. Thank God we had backups. And this happened to OpenZFS last autumn. One case is not statistics yet, doesn't prove anything, but still. I know a similar case, slightly larger one. 2 out of 3 corporate clients have the following attitude towards ZFS. An excellent system as long as it works, but God forbid it crashes, then and you can use it to store files, not to work with them. Probably this is not the thing we're looking for. I have no comments on this. Because where they used ZFS, active data was in AMG, and the usual space in ZFS was archive data. And the archive data was on the XFS, it was on X4. And it's still there. This data is still there. And maybe my last question from me. Then we will ask questions from our listeners. In your opinion, what a DBA cannot do, even if he is threatened to be fired? Maybe you saw cases where a DBA did something which was totally horrible. On December the 30th, I received a phone call. Can you help us? I said, yeah, no problem. And this person wanted to save some space on the disk for the database and to delete everything except the databases directory. This was a total death for Postgres because all the rest files are also something that they need. Postgres revokes even reading rights from everybody except itself. So if you start tampering with it manually, then you need to know very well why you're doing this, because the risk of crashing database to zero is very high. There's PGF file dump utility, which will help you to extract raw data. But this is the worst case. You have no backups, you have nothing, because PGF file dump will extract everything in an unsorted way. And you'll have to sort them manually to sort old data from new data. So this is the worst of the worst cases, when there's no other way. Can you kill it by settings? Settings, configuration of Postgres. Can you prevent it? You're talking about a SIM card, right? Well, actually, it never dies, as long as you don't have any blackout or panic in your kernel. So you will learn when things are very bad, when things are really bad. When after blackout, your database doesn't launch, and before that it will work fine. So please don't do it this way. But this is what I wanted to tell you from my experience working with my clients. One of our clients made a replica. It took them a long time for this replica to work well. All was well, but when a disaster happened, it turned out that the replica was useless. Why? Because the client didn't have any policy as to failover to the replica. As a result, the failover to the replica took 24 hours. So please bear in mind, if you have make a replica for safe failover, if something happens, then you need to think about the mechanism of this failover. There are lots of methods on the internet, from manual to building a cluster, some sort of a cluster, etcd, a peacemaker, or crony. You can use any of them. But as long as you do this, moreover, I encourage you to think not just that you have a master in the replica, you have master and a second master. Therefore, you need to create a new replica and to be able to switch over to the replica. There's no return from replica to the master. These should be two similar machines. They should be of equal value. Not just that your replica is on an old server somewhere. Another point. Vacuum switch off. Don't switch off the vacuum, please. Or at least think what you're doing when you switch off your vacuum. Then you need to monitor, and most probably when you switch off the vacuum, it will cost you more than an operating auto vacuum. Please don't do so, because in particular, if you switch it off and then you forget about it, then the wraparound comes and you find out that first the database was littering logs for a month, and then it will tell you bye-bye, I'm not going to open any new transactions until you do auto vacuum. That will definitely happen when you need to prepare your annual report, on your last day of your annual report preparation. Yeah, that's for sure. Another important point, many people have already faced it. In particular, not only those who work with 1C, sometimes it happens that there are transactions which get stole idling transaction. And the platform, for some reason, forgot about this transaction. This may happen sometimes. The only way to tackle this is use monitoring. Postgres Pro has got this setting of the longest idling transaction time. If there's a timeout, the transaction will be cut off. When I answered the first question about PG dump, an idling transaction brings the same problems. The vacuum stops deleting outdated transaction. Postgres will not be able to see that this is an idling transaction, or rather the client application is calculating something very complicated. Thank you very much. Perfect, very well. Thank you. I see some questions. I see some questions in the chat, right? Yes, we have questions. I'll start from the end. There's this question that Fedor likes so much about PG dump. There's a problem. An error occurs. The buffer of memory cannot exceed 1 gigabyte when you do the PG dump. Is there a way to overcome this other than export individual tables? The question consists part of the answer. It's about the binary mode. Look, 1 gigabyte. Historically, a lot has been related to it because the fields in the table in Postgres that have any length, like texts or similar fields, 4 bytes have been allocated for their length, but 2 bits in these 4 bytes have been allocated for features. The value is compressed or the value is too lost. So the length is contained in a 30-bit value. And when Postgres developers were based on this gigabyte, they introduced this limitation in the protocol in many other cases. This is not a good thing, because it wasn't good of them to think that gigabyte would be enough for everybody. So what happened? When you and when C is fond of put everything into byte array, it puts everything there and everything was fine. Then in the PG dump, you have this binary value, which is below 1 gigabyte. Let's say half a gigabyte. And you do your dump in text mode. So you print it in 16-bit values. Then 1 gig is already a value. If it's slightly more than that, that's in 16 bits it'll be slightly more, because you code 1 byte with 2 letters, with 2 characters. There's this setting of, I think the name is output. You can use it to correct, because you can do this without escapes. But the problem there is that in byte table you have mostly non-printed characters. Then you'll have to use 3 bytes, which is even worse. Therefore, there's no good solution at the moment. We tried tackling this issue, but turned out that it was quite an invasive thing, because it will result. Projects will have to be correct everywhere. You can have a look at it in the byte, but we said there's no other type where the limit is higher. So you have to rework it all to make this limit not 2 in the 32nd degree, but 2 in the 64th degree. Now this will affect those people who don't need this. Their fields will get grower, or will get growing all of a sudden. Oh, all right, thank you. So there's no good way out. Yes, the binary one. All right. Next question from Yuri Vlasov. Can you share your experience of transition from a big database Postgres SQL to Postgres Pro and Astra Linux? The question has to export a file, how to check it for correctness if something is not exported or cannot be imported. What are the tools to check the validity? I think I will take this one. It's like this. For big databases, except for DT, there are no other options. But you can get prepared. I'm not saying that you need to block the base, that nobody's working there, but you should do this over the New Year holidays or something. So you need to delete the outcomes. Clean the results table in MSQL by truncate. Then probably 600 gigabytes or less than that will be left from your terabyte, because results take a lot of space. Again, you need to analyze your data. Quite often it happens that one C stores files just in the database. So developers should prepare a special program that will export these files. It will delete all the files and will only keep links to these files. If you need them that badly, then you need this on a one-off. You export, you move, you load them back. You take away the results, you take away the files, and I'm sure that this amount of your database will be cut into half. Even 3 terabyte database can be exported and imported easily. So your task is to ensure on one C server, in a temporary folder, for the user, you need to ensure a sufficient space to export the DT. How much does a DT weigh? Have a look. What's your full backup? What's the weight of your full backup? So that's about the weight of your DT. You need to provide twice as much space, just in case. You need to provide the space, because no matter where you store your DT, the server would first load it to its temp folder, and only then will it copy it where you said. Because don't say that the D file will be exported into network, because it will take you a lot of time. Better do this locally. The load is and the import the same, provide enough space, import. Then after the import, you go to configurator and say recalculate the results. This system will work out everything, all will be fine. How can you check if everything has loaded? Well, my piece of advice is following. Don't export and import in batch mode. Do this manually via configurator. If the configurator says the base has been exported and imported, then it has imported. How does this happen? It happens in 3 stages. First, metadata is created. Create table. The configurator checks all the metadata, and it creates the tables. Then it creates, then inserts, or maybe copy begins. Data is generated. Then creates index. It's a cheater way to find out whether all the data has been downloaded. Go and check if an index has been created. If an index has been created, then the system has already downloaded all the data and starts developing indexes. Anything can happen there. RP host can crash. And one more thing. And clearly, 64 bits and the server and the client. Forget about 32. the configuration should work only in 64 bits. Your configuration does not have enough space to get in the dump. You're still in 32. Forget 32.
This operative for application, you need to ensure it for hardware. So it's loaded and go ahead. So maximum, it's not possible that you wait for everything on the system. Wrote OK, 1S written OK, it's all loaded, so it's guaranteed. Everything loaded. Then we calculate the results. In reality, in good disks, to transfer a 1 terabyte base will take one night. Will be offloading 3 hours and loading for 10 hours. Loading takes time because DT as dump don't include indices, only commands to create, and then it reads it. Again, Postgres is able to create multi-flow indices. Don't forget multi-streamed indices. Don't forget to make this setting as a second thing. Platform 1S learned to calculate results, multi-streams. In 18th version, don't forget to set 4 streams, or you can put 12 streams. Results will be calculated by 12 tables, not by one. All the ways to speed up are available. Don't be afraid. No problem. And preparation, as I said. Excellent. Thank you. We have a question from Andrei Lapinov. Other examples of implementing of 13th version of PostgreSQL. Were there any difficulties with it? So 13th version actually is not available yet. The releases approved by 1S with the platform. We released a version as for our internal testing, and people already tried to test it with partners. So I don't advise installing it, although it's possible. It looks like it will work, but bear in mind that read the licensing agreement with 1S. I think they don't allow it, and they don't take it with unsupported databases, so it's your risk. But we've seen it's working. Yeah, good. It's working, no problem. So what is prod? For 5 users, the accounting is also prod. I think many installations like that for some large ones I personally didn't install in prod, but for testing 13th showed good results, and I can tell you about one case, calculation of ERP cost for 12 Postgres to surpass MS SQL. The workman should have been done for 32 megabytes, so it's not consistent with multi-stream life of parameters. Well, I haven't encountered the servers of 4 terabytes. Okay, good. Possible. That's one thing. So do we install 13th? And yes, and the same results we achieve with more workmem of 256 megabytes. Good changes in planner. It works differently, connects with temporary tables. We see changes of plan in 13th on the same data. Therefore, it works, but again with some caveats, some further answers, because officially it's not supported. So one has technical support. You cannot contact with this configuration. Okay, clear. We'll hold that the support will be added. I don't see any other questions. Then I have a question to Fedor. So those who looked at the conference yesterday found out about it. The adaptive optimization of queries. An English abbreviation is not pronounceable, AQL. We call it AQUAT. So briefly, I will tell you, for those who haven't seen it, what's the point of Planner? Planner can make mistakes. It's bad, but it's normal. So what can we do? We can record actual plan of execution and a supposed plan, and then analyze it if actual plan several times for like supposed number of rows. The plan thought there will be one row, and it's not known what will be in functions, but 3 million rows arrived. Then connection was selected suboptimal, or the method for data was not effective. So what do adaptive planners do? They analyze that they receive a similar plan, they look at their cache roughly and replaces the numbers manually in the planner that you don't receive 2 rows but 2 million, and then the planner plans a different query regarding this. So the question to Fedor, if possible, if you can explain it about adaptive optimization of queries and your opinion. Is there any future for this technology while working with 1S? You know how you like 1S queries for 40 megabytes and you cannot write it manually. How do you evaluate this? Is it going to fly and kill the features? How 1S users want the counting entries very fast and reporting extremely fast. Is it possible to combine it in 1S Lab? Well, briefly, yes. Thank you. Look, here is, I'll tell you about the principle of planner's work. Planner in Postgres, I will not distract on what they can be is separate theories. Like planners in a database is the most complicated part. Planners in Postgres is caused based on weights. It's the simplest algorithm which looks like we take all the ways to perform queries and try to find out how much they cost. And it's difficult to calculate the time. In some conditional units, we can calculate it. So the cost depends on if you want to look at the one record in the table with sequential search is expensive. You need to read the whole table. If we know it's one record, we need a scan index. But if it's a large table, if it's one page, it's easier to read it fully and read all the records there. You need to calculate certain cost. The cost is based on estimates, how many pages, need to how many in cache, and much on how many transactions need to be done on top of the rows, and which are they expensive or not, how much memory needed for sorting, how much it will take time. That's one side. On the other hand, for these estimates, we need to know how many will be there. It's clear that ideal way to perform the query, but you understand it's expensive. So all databases and Postgres is not unique here. It tries to predict how many records will be there and how it can be done. It remembers certain techniques, as histograms in the fields and with various techniques, and tries to catch connections of fields. There were excellent presentation yesterday of Andrei Lepikhov. He's one of the engineers, and he likes speaking about it. You have a column, male and female and professional, like tractor machinists, and a nanny, like how many men or nannies and women as machine operators. But it turned out to be dependent, and so these predictions not always good, because there are some surges and uneven data, and so we know distribution inside the table is good. We can operate it, so and join table. The more joins, errors, the more errors, and errors happen there. So the idea of this patch is not try to predict, but to see in the history what was really selected under these conditions and how many, and give this number to a planner. It doesn't impact plans themselves and costs. It predicts the number and tries to predict based on previous experience. Yes, if distribution change significantly, it will lie, but has a bag of settings can be taught and can learn each time. So Andrei Lepikhov knows the details, and he can tell you. Therefore, dreams that the managers will have this report immediately. And bear in mind that first you better check yourself, then the manager will get fast report, but you might have to suffer if optimizer didn't guess. In this case, the problem is that it looks at the past in order to predict the future, and the mechanism doesn't work in case of serious changes of data. It's not surprising. Those who are driving modern cars with adaptive gearbox automatically, if you drive long time and then try to pass this gearbox, is suspended, and it works the same way as the data changes slowly and queries drastically changed. Possibly you need a session of learning. Thank you. One small question. If 13 release Postgres is not supported, which one you recommend? 12 or earlier one? Put 12 5.1 and Enterprise, of course. Postgres Pro Enterprise, I hope. Yes, of course. In 5 minutes, I'll tell you what is sweet there for compression. Thank you, Anton. Thanks to all who will be able to communicate in spatial chat. And